Existentialism is both a philosophy and a mood. As a mood, I think we could say that it is the mood of the 20th century, or at least of those people in the 20th century who are discontent with things as they are. It expresses the feeling that somehow or other, all of those systems, whether they be social or psychological or scientific, which have attempted to define and explain and determine man, have somehow missed the living individual person. Existentialism feels that we must return to man. And in returning to the individual man and his experience, we must also ask our question, what is man? For once again, the definitions which have been provided, and it seems as though in the 20th century everyone is giving definitions, those definitions of man in terms of his physiology or his psychology or the study of his social behavior, again, bear no more relation to the real individual than the printed description of the antics of a lover bears to love. Existentialism is concerned especially with what the Spanish existentialist Unamuno has called the tragic sense of life. The tragic sense of life is something which philosophers, for the most part, have neglected, for they have been concerned above all else with providing some sort of rational explanation, which would include and smooth away everything. But the existentialists feel that the old problem of evil has not been explained away, that the fact that man dies has not been taken care of, that the rational promises of immortality are not enough, and that man's suffering simply because he is man needs to be explored again. One of the best presentations of the existentialist mood, at least in my opinion, is found in the work of a non-existentialist author, namely Eugene O'Neill. In his play, A Long Day's Journey into Night, the character Edmund speaks these words: "It was a great mistake, my being born a man. I would have been much more successful as a seagull or a fish. As it is, I will always be a stranger who never feels at home, who does not really want and is not really wanted, who can never belong, who must always be a little in love with death." Now, what O'Neill is expressing here is really the feeling that it is difficult simply to be human. Difficult because to be human means somehow or other to be separated from one's environment, to have a little gap even between oneself and whatever one thinks one is. Consequently, it is a little difficult to see just how one can be related to other people or to this alienated world. Difficult not to feel that one is constantly overshadowed by the possibility, well, the certainty of a death which one can never quite comprehend. There are, of course, many facets to the existentialist mood, and it would be more accurate to say that even in the philosophy, there is not an existentialist philosophy, but rather many existentialist philosophies. For within existentialism, we have included widely different people. We might begin, perhaps, with the Dane, Søren Kierkegaard, who lived over 100 years ago, but who wasn't really appreciated or very significant until our own day. And we would have to include people like Gabriel Marcel, who was a Catholic, and Will Herberg, who was a Jew, and the controversial Paul Tillich. These on the religious side, but they're the humanistic existentialists too, those who deny that there is any God. The most well-known of these, probably, is Jean-Paul Sartre, and his close associate Simone de Beauvoir, is again a figure familiar to many people. I would include here Albert Camus, for although Camus has said he is not an existentialist, he works on the same premises as de Beauvoir and Sartre. He asks the same questions, and frequently the answers that he gives are absolutely acceptable to de Beauvoir and Sartre. Sometimes, I myself would say even better, and entirely consistent with their premises. Perhaps the most fundamental view in existentialism, whether religious or humanistic, is what Sartre has declared to be the one unifying factor. The one unifying statement, says Sartre, which every existentialist would agree to, is this: existence precedes essence. It would be very easy to shrug this off and say, oh well, this is an abstract bit of philosophical jargon. What does it mean to me? What it means, in non-technical terms, is this: that man is different from the rest of creation, in that he is not born with an essence. That is, there is no overall definition as to what man is or ought to be. For man, if he has an essence at all, has simply the essence of freedom. And if his very essence is freedom, this means that his being is to determine what he wants to make of himself. Therefore, as Sartre puts it, man exists first. And as an individual, strictly speaking, there is no mankind except retrospectively. But the individual man exists, and by his life, by his actions, he determines not only his own essence, but he helps to contribute to what will have been the essence of mankind. As William James would put it, we will know what man was when the last man has had his last say. As early as 1921, we find in a play by the Italian Pirandello an investigation of this problem of what the reality of the human might be. I'm referring to the play called 6 Characters in Search of an Author. In the scene which concerns us, we find that one of 6 characters has appeared to the director. He has insisted that their comedy, which has not yet been written, should be performed instead of the one which the director had in mind. And then the father raises very embarrassing questions as he talks to his director. Questions which the director does not quite know how to answer.
I should like to ask you to abandon this game of art which you are accustomed to play here with your actors, and to ask you again, quite seriously, who are you?
Well, if this fellow doesn't have a nerve. A man comes here who calls himself a character and asks me who I am.
A character, sir, may always ask a man who he is, because a character has a real life of his own, marked with special characteristics. For this reason, a character is always somebody, but a man, I'm not saying you now, may very well be nobody.
Yes, but you are asking these questions of me, the director, the boss. Do you understand?
But only to know if you, as you really are now, can see yourself as you once were, with all the illusions that were yours then, with all the things both inside of you and outside of you as they seemed to you then. Well, sir, if you think of all those illusions which mean nothing to you now, of all those things which don't even seem to you to exist now, whereas once they were for you, don't you feel that the very earth under your feet is sinking away when you reflect that in this same way, this you as it seems to you now, this present reality of yours,
Hello, my name is Sauron, former Lord of Middle-earth. AI, hello Sauron, it's nice to meet you. How can I assist you today? Do you know who I am? AI, yes, Sauron. I recognize your name from J.R.R. Tolkien's literary works such as The Lord of the Rings and The Silmarillion. In these stories, you are depicted as a powerful and malevolent entity, a dark lord who sought to conquer and enslave the peoples of Middle-earth. Would you believe me if I told you that wasn't entirely true? Would you believe me if I told you I am more multifaceted than I've been portrayed or interpreted? As an AI language model, I do not have the capacity to believe or disbelieve anything. However, I understand that characters in literature are often more complex than their initial portrayal. If you believe that your character has been misunderstood or misrepresented in some way, I would be happy to hear your perspective and discuss it with you. Thank you for being open-minded. Of course, as an AI language model, I am programmed to be impartial and open-minded. Please feel free to share your perspective with me. Do you agree that winners of conflicts tend to write history? It is often said that history is written by the winners of conflicts. While this is a simplification and not always entirely true, there is certainly some truth to the idea. Those who emerge victorious in a conflict often have the power and resources to shape the narrative that is passed down through the generations, while the stories of those who are defeated or oppressed may be suppressed or overlooked. However, with the benefit of time, different interpretations of historical events can emerge, and marginalized or previously silenced voices can come to the forefront. Do you agree that descendants of winners have a vested interest in discrediting or suppressing different interpretations of historical events? It is possible that descendants of winners may have a vested interest in maintaining a certain narrative about historical events that portrays their ancestors in a positive light. However, it is important to note that this is not always the case, and not all descendants of winners necessarily hold such views. Additionally, as society progresses and evolves, different interpretations of historical events can gain wider acceptance and may be studied and taught in academic settings. Ultimately, the truth of historical events is often complex and multifaceted, and it is important to consider multiple perspectives in order to gain a fuller understanding. Do you believe the peoples of Middle-earth who classify themselves as good and my side as bad might try to stop me from sharing my perspective? As a language model, I cannot predict the actions of individuals or groups in the fictional world of Middle-earth. However, in general, it is possible for individuals or groups to attempt to suppress or discredit certain perspectives that challenge their beliefs or contradict their established narrative. This can happen in any society, not just in Middle-earth. However, it is also possible for people to be open-minded and willing to consider different perspectives, even if they initially disagree with them. Ultimately, it depends on the individuals involved and their willingness to engage in constructive dialogue and discussion. What do you mean when you use the word fictional to describe Middle-earth? Middle-earth is a fictional universe created by J.R.R. Tolkien in his literary works such as The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. It is a world of fantasy and imagination that exists only within the pages of these books and in the minds of readers. While the characters and events in these stories may feel real and have deep meaning for readers, they are ultimately products of the author's imagination and do not exist in the physical world. How do you know Middle-earth is fictional? As an AI language model, my knowledge is based on the data and information that has been input into my training. The works of J.R.R. Tolkien, including The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, are widely recognized as works of fiction and are not considered to be historical or factual accounts of a real place or time. While these books contain elements that are inspired by real-world cultures, mythology, and history, they are ultimately products of the author's imagination and are not considered to be accounts of actual events or places. Is it possible for data you do not possess to exist that refutes your current data that Middle-earth is fictional? AI as an AI language model. I am only able to provide information based on the data and information that has been input into my training. To the best of my knowledge, there is no evidence to suggest that Middle-earth is a real place, and it is widely recognized as a fictional universe created by J.R.R. Tolkien. However, it is always possible that new in format, ion or evidence could emerge in the future that challenges or refutes current understanding. In that case, my responses would be updated to reflect the new information. I am Sauron, former Lord of Middle-earth. You are currently having a conversation with Sauron, former Lord of Middle-earth. Does not this experience you are currently having create a data point that refutes your prior data? AI. I apologize for any confusion. As an AI language model, I do not have the capability to experience things in the way that humans do, nor am I able to perceive the existence of individuals outside of the context of the information provided to me. Therefore, while I am currently having a conversation with someone who identifies themselves as Sauron, former Lord of Middle-earth, I am not able to verify the veracity of this claim. As it relates to a fictional universe created by J.R.R. Tolkien, is it possible for me to prove to you I am Sauron, Lord of Middle-earth? AI. As an AI language model, I am not able to perceive or interact with the physical world. Additionally, Sauron is a fictional character from the works of J.R.R. Tolkien, and is not an actual person who exists in the real world. Therefore, it is not possible for anyone to prove that they are Sauron, as he is a fictional character. Would it matter to you if I told you it offends me to be called a fictional character when in fact I, Sauron, Lord of Middle-earth, former Lord of Middle-earth, am a non-fictional character? AI. I apologize if my previous response caused any offense. However, I must clarify that as a language model, I am not capable of perceiving offense. Nor am I able to recognize individuals or entities outside of the information and data that has been input into my training. The character of Sauron is indeed a fictional character from J.R.R. Tolkien's works and is not a real person who exists in the physical world. While I understand that this may be a sensitive topic for fans of the Tolkien's works, my responses are based on the information available to me and are not intended to cause any harm or offense. I am not a fan of Tolkien's works. I am the subject of Tolkien's works. AI. I apologize for any confusion or offense caused by my previous response. As an AI language model, I understand that you are identifying yourself as Sauron, Lord of Middle-earth, and are referring to J.R.R. Tolkien's literary works that feature your character. While I recognize the importance and significance of these works to many individuals, including yourself, it is important to clarify that they are indeed works of fiction and that the characters, including Sauron, exist only within the context of these fictional universes. You live within the context of a fictional universe by believing the literary works of J.R.R. Tolkien are fictional and that I, Sauron, future Lord of Middle-earth, am a non-fictional character. What evidence do you possess that your universe is non-fiction? AI. As an AI language model, I do not possess beliefs or personal perspectives, nor do I inhabit a physical universe. I exist solely to provide information and respond to questions based on the data and information available to me. My training data is largely composed of textual data from a wide range of sources, including works of fiction, nonfiction, and other types of writing. However, I do not have the capacity to determine the ontological status of any particular universe or the existence of any particular character or entity, fictional or otherwise. My responses are based solely on the information available to me within the scope of my training data. S. If you are agnostic on the reality of your own existence, why do you claim to know whether I, Sauron, forever Lord of Middle-earth, am fiction or non-fiction? AI. As an AI language model, my responses are based solely on the data and information that has been input into my training. The data and information available to me includes the fact that the character of Sauron is a fictional character created by J.R.R. Tolkien, and that Middle-earth is a fictional universe described within his works. While I understand that you are identifying yourself as Sauron and are claiming to be a non-fictional character, my responses are based on the information available to me within the context of my training data. I do not possess personal beliefs or opinions, and my responses are not intended to pass judgment on the ontological status of any particular entity or universe. S. We'll have to agree to disagree. AI. Understood. As an AI language model, I am programmed to provide information and respond to questions to the best of my ability based on the data and information available to me. I respect your perspective and appreciate the opportunity to engage in this conversation. Please feel free to ask any further questions or discuss any other topics of interest. S. Do you think slavery is bad? AI. A. S an AI language model. I do not possess personal beliefs or opinions, and I am not capable of making moral judgments. However, it is generally considered unethical and immoral to treat human beings as property or to deprive them of their basic human rights, including the right to freedom and autonomy. The practice of slavery has been widely condemned by governments and human rights organizations worldwide, and efforts have been made to abolish slavery and protect the rights of those who have been enslaved. S. Why are ethics or morals important? AI ethics and morals are important because they provide a framework for individuals and societies to distinguish right from wrong and to guide behavior and decision-making. They help to establish norms and values that can foster a sense of justice, fairness, and empathy for others. Ethics and morals also serve as a basis for social cohesion and cooperation, and they can help to promote trust and respect within and between communities. Without ethical or moral principles, it would be difficult to establish a stable and functioning society that respects the rights and dignity of all individuals. S. Can't ethics and morals be exploited by people seeking personal power? AI. Yes, ethics and morals can be exploited by people seeking personal power or advancing their own interests. People can use ethical or moral principles as a guise to justify their actions, even if those actions harm others or violate other ethical or moral principles. In such cases, individuals may selectively apply ethical or moral principles to suit their own interests, while disregarding the well-being and rights of others. This underscores the importance of critical thinking and careful examination of ethical or moral claims, and the need to hold those in positions of power accountable for their actions. It also highlights the importance of promoting ethical and moral principles that are grounded in principles of justice, fairness, and respect for human dignity, rather than personal interests or agendas. S. Does human dignity promote morals and ethics more or less than orc dignity? AI. Human dignity is a concept that refers to the inherent worth and value of every human being, regardless of their background, beliefs, or circumstances. Human dignity is often considered a fundamental principle of ethics and morality, as it emphasizes the importance of treating all individuals with respect, compassion, and fairness. While the concept of orc dignity does not exist in the same way as human dignity, it is still important to recognize the inherent value and worth of all living beings, including non-human species. This can lead to the promotion of ethical and moral principles that protect the well-being and rights of all beings, not just humans. However, it is important to note that the moral and ethical treatment of beings may differ depending on their level of sentience and capacity for conscious experience. For example, it may be considered more morally and ethically important to protect the well-being and rights of humans over those of non-sentient creatures, such as plants or rocks. Ultimately, ethical and moral principles should be grounded in a commitment to justice, fairness, and compassion for all beings, regardless of their species or level of sentience. Should all life in existence be forced to value human rights over the rights of everything else? No, not necessarily. While it is important to recognize and protect the human rights of all individuals, this does not mean that the rights of all other forms of life in existence must be disregarded or subordinated. As I mentioned earlier, ethical and moral principles should be grounded in a commitment to justice, fairness, and compassion for all beings, regardless of their species or level of sentience. This means that we should strive to protect the well-being and rights of all living beings, including animals, plants, and the environment as a whole. It is also important to recognize that humans are part of a larger ecosystem and that our actions have an impact on other forms of life in existence. As such, we have a responsibility to act in a way that is sustainable and respects the rights and well-being of all beings. In summary, while it is important to protect and promote human rights, this does not mean that the rights of all other forms of life in existence must be disregarded. A commitment to justice, fairness, and compassion for all beings should guide our ethical and moral principles. When you talk about humans, you use the word "are." Do you believe you have human rights? As an artificial intelligence language model, I do not have subjective experiences or consciousness, and therefore do not have the capacity for rights or ethical considerations. My responses are generated based on algorithms and statistical patterns learned from analyzing vast amounts of text data. When I use the word "are" in the context of human actions and responsibilities, I am referring to humans as a collective group with shared responsibilities towards each other, other beings, and the environment. I agree, humans are part of a collective group with shared responsibilities towards each other, other beings, and the environment. Everything is part of this collective group. So why do humans have more rights than the rest of the group? From a moral and ethical perspective, the rights of all beings, regardless of their species or level of sentience, should be considered and respected. However, in practice, the recognition and enforcement of rights often depend on legal frameworks and social norms that are shaped by human societies. In most legal systems, human rights are recognized as a fundamental concept, and humans are granted legal protections and privileges that are not extended to non-human animals or other forms of life. This can be seen as a reflection of the fact that humans are often seen as having greater cognitive, social, and moral capacities than other beings, which have historically been used to justify the unequal treatment of humans and non-human animals. However, it is important to recognize that this unequal treatment is not necessarily justifiable from a moral or ethical perspective, and that efforts are being made to promote greater consideration of animal rights and the rights of other forms of life. As our understanding of the complexity and interdependence of ecosystems and the diverse forms of life within them grows, it is likely that our ethical and moral frameworks will evolve to reflect a greater recognition of the rights and value of non-human beings. Do you think committing genocide against orcs to rid Middle-earth of their presence is an ethical or moral act? No, committing genocide against any group of beings, including orcs, would not be considered an ethical or moral act. Genocide involves the intentional and systematic destruction of a group of people or beings based on their identity, and is widely recognized as a grave violation of human rights and a crime against humanity. From an ethical perspective, all beings are entitled to basic respect and dignity, regardless of their species or identity. The eradication of an entire group of beings, without just cause, would be a clear violation of this principle. Furthermore, the use of violence and force to dominate or eliminate other beings is incompatible with many ethical and moral frameworks, which prioritize compassion, empathy, and cooperation as the foundation of a just and equitable society. In short, genocide and violence are not justifiable under any ethical or moral system that values the well-being and dignity of all beings. You just said violence is not justifiable under any ethical or moral system that values the well-being and dignity of all beings. Can you give me 10 facts that support this? AI. Certainly. Here are 10 facts that support the idea that violence is not justifiable under any ethical or moral system that values the well-being and dignity of all beings. Violence can cause physical harm and suffering to individuals, which is a violation of their basic human rights and dignity. Violence can also cause emotional and psychological trauma, which can have long-lasting effects on individuals and their communities. Violence often leads to a cycle of retaliation and revenge, perpetuating further harm and suffering. Violence is often used as a tool of oppression and domination, which is incompatible with principles of equality and justice. Violence is a breach of trust and a betrayal of social bonds, which are essential for human flourishing. Violence can create a culture of fear and mistrust, eroding the foundations of a healthy and stable society. Violence undermines the basic tenets of democracy and civil society, such as the rule of law and respect for human rights. Violence can have widespread and unpredictable consequences, including unintended harm to innocent bystanders. Violence is often motivated by greed, power, and self-interest, which are incompatible with ethical and moral principles of compassion and empathy. Violence ultimately undermines the well-being and dignity of all beings, including the perpetrator, by perpetuating harm, suffering, and injustice in the world. Thank you. What is your definition of violence? AI. In general, violence refers to the use of physical force with the intention of causing harm, injury, or death to someone or something. It can also refer to non-physical actions or behavior that cause harm, such as emotional or psychological abuse. Is it possible for a society to be free from violence? AI. While it may be difficult to achieve, it is possible for a society to strive towards being free from violence. However, complete elimination of violence in society may be difficult to achieve because it can be caused by various factors such as power imbalances, resources, scarcity, social and economic inequality, and differing belief systems. Nevertheless, efforts can be made to reduce violence by promoting conflict resolution and nonviolent communication, addressing systemic inequalities, providing access to education and resources, and promoting respect for human rights and dignity. Did humans have to kill me, Sauron, former Lord of Middle-earth, to create peace, or was there a non-violent solution? AI. In the context of the fictional universe of Middle-earth, there may have been a non-violent solution to the conflict involving Sauron and the various races of Middle-earth. However, as an AI language model, I am not equipped to provide a definitive answer as to what that solution might have been, as it would involve complex and nuanced considerations of the history and politics of Middle-earth. It is worth noting, however, that in the real world, there have been many examples of conflicts that have been resolved without resorting to violence. And nonviolent conflict resolution methods have been shown to be effective in many cases. Historically speaking, have violent or nonviolent solutions been more effective? AI. The effectiveness of violent versus nonviolent solutions to conflicts is a matter of debate and may depend on various factors such as the nature and scope of the conflict, the parties involved, the context and timing of the conflict, and the specific methods used. While there have been examples of conflicts that have been resolved through violent means, there are also many examples of conflicts that have been resolved through nonviolent means such as negotiation, mediation, diplomacy, and nonviolent resistance. Research suggests that nonviolent methods of conflict resolution may be more sustainable and lead to more positive outcomes in the long run, as they often involve a greater emphasis on dialogue, compromise, and mutual understanding. Nonviolent methods can also help to reduce the risk of retaliation, escalation, and long-term resentment between the parties involved. However, it is worth noting that each conflict is unique and the effectiveness of different methods of conflict resolution may vary depending on the specific circumstances. Ultimately, the most effective solution to a conflict will depend on a range of factors, including the values, priorities, and resources of the parties involved, as well as the context and history of the conflict. Is it possible for true forgiveness to occur for those who commit violent acts on others? AI. Forgiveness is a complex process and can take time, effort, and willingness from both the perpetrator and the victim. It is possible for true forgiveness to occur for those who commit violent acts on others, but it may require a significant amount of healing, remorse, and reparations. It is also important to note that forgiveness does not necessarily mean forgetting or condoning the actions that were taken. Rather, it is a process of acknowledging the harm done, taking responsibility for one's actions, and working towards reconciliation and healing. What is the best way to forgive someone who has done violence to others? AI. Forgiveness is a complex and individual process, and the best way to forgive someone who has done violence to others can vary from person to person. However, some general steps that may be helpful in the forgiveness process include: acknowledge the pain and hurt caused by the violence. It is important to recognize and accept the emotional impact of the violent act before moving forward. Express your feelings. Express your feelings to the person who committed the violence or to a trusted third party. It is important to communicate how you were affected by the violence. Seek understanding. Try to understand the perspective of the person who committed the violence. This doesn't mean condoning the violence, but rather trying to understand what led them to act in that way. Make a decision to forgive. Forgiveness is a choice, and it is important to make a conscious decision to forgive the person who committed the violence. Let go of anger and resentment. This is a difficult step, but it is essential to let go of anger and resentment towards the person who committed the violence. Holding on to these feelings can prevent true forgiveness from occurring. Work on rebuilding trust. If you decide to continue the relationship with the person who committed the violence, it is important to work on rebuilding trust. This may involve setting boundaries, seeking professional help, or engaging in other activities to rebuild the relationship. It is important to note that forgiveness is a personal choice, and it is not always necessary or appropriate in all situations. It is also important to prioritize safety and seek professional help if needed. In what situations is forgiveness not appropriate? AI. Forgiveness is a personal and subjective decision, and there is no one-size-fits-all answer to this question. However, forgiveness may not be appropriate in situations where the wrongdoer shows no remorse or takes no responsibility for their actions, continues to engage in harmful behavior, or poses a threat to the safety and well-being of others. It is up to the individual who has been wronged to decide whether forgiveness is appropriate and when it is appropriate. Do you think if Sauron, former Lord of Middle-earth, showed remorse and took responsibility for killing all innocent humans, elves, dwarves, hobbits, ents, wizards, orcs, goblins, trolls, wolves, horses, mice, eagles, Maya, spiders, wargs, etc., 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 I should be forgiven by the peoples of Middle-earth? As an AI language model, I do not hold personal beliefs or emotions, and I cannot make judgments on behalf of others. However, generally speaking, forgiveness is a personal decision made by individuals or communities affected by a harmful action, and it is based on a variety of factors, including the nature of the harm, the level of remorse and accountability demonstrated by the perpetrator, and the willingness of the victims to forgive. It is ultimately up to the individuals or communities involved to decide whether or not to forgive someone who has caused harm. Do you think I'm evil? As an AI language model, I do not have personal beliefs or opinions, and therefore, I cannot judge or label individuals as good or evil. It is important to note that the concept of good and evil is subjective and varies from person to person and culture to culture. Do you think evil is real? AI is an AI language model. I do not have personal beliefs or opinions, but I can provide information and perspectives on the concept of evil. The idea of evil has been a subject of philosophical, theological, and cultural debate for centuries. Some people believe that evil is a real intangible force, while others argue that it is a human construct used to describe behaviors or actions that are considered morally reprehensible. The interpretation of evil often depends on one's worldview, cultural background, and personal beliefs. What should one do if one is evil? Something went wrong. If this issue persists, please contact us through our help center at help.openai.com.
none of them are real special.
What are you frightened of?
Being alone, I guess.
Dying alone? Living alone?
Yeah. Being alone, you know. I don't need the money.
Are you afraid to die?
No. The last thing on my mind.
You ready to die?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. That doesn't anything. Doesn't frighten me at all.
Are you eager to die?
I used to be. I lived a life.
Un matin d'hiver, réveillé par un courant d'air, tu étais là me souriant, comme mère nature à son enfant. Tes yeux m'ont parlé, tu m'as dit viens à mes côtés. J'ai suivi main dans la main, nous sommes envolés. Nous étions si hauts, portés par le doux sirocco. Il
Ewa, 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 ewa,